The United Nations General Assembly passed several resolutions denouncing human rights abuses against Rohingya Muslims and other minority groups, including alleged arbitrary arrests, torture, rape, and deaths in detention by the Myanmar government. However, Bangladesh expressed deep disappointment during the adoption of the resolution on 18 June 2021 on the situation of Myanmar, which it said failed to adequately reflect on the Rohingya crisis and in recommending any action to resolve that catastrophe. However, the recent adoption of the Rohingya resolution at the United Nations General Assembly on the situation of human rights of Rohingya Muslims and other minorities in Myanmar was jointly tabled by the member states of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation (OIC) and the European Union (EU) on 18 November 2021. For the first time by consensus, demonstrates the international community's strong resolve to end this crisis.
There have been a number of General Assembly resolutions adopted both on the Rohingya crisis and on the coup and the state of emergency. And these two issues are both being addressed by the General Assembly. The earlier resolutions on the Rohingya crisis that the General Assembly adopted were not by consensus. They were strong votes in favor, but there were some significant countries that abstained, including China and Russia and some of Myanmar's neighbors in Southeast Asia. As you point out, the most recent resolution, which to the best of my knowledge was in the third committee of the General Assembly. I'm not sure there was a vote in the General Assembly itself, but in any case, the third committee is all members of the UN. And that one was adopted by consensus, which is important because it does send a strong signal to the regime in Myanmar that the international community is unified. There was some strong language in there about violence generally in the country, but specifically referencing the plight of the Rohingyans. So the fact that there was a consensus resolution on that was important. However, I just want to stress that one can't read too much into this, because on the one hand, while it was adopted by consensus, in the statements that China and Russia made at the time, they dissociated themselves from the resolution. So they didn't block it. They didn't abstain from it. They went along with the consensus, but they did indicate that they were still somewhat uncomfortable with it. And I think probably the reason there was a consensus resolution is because there's a reluctance on the part of any country, including Russia, China, and some of the neighbors who were reluctant to condemn Myanmar. But sort of now at this stage, no one wants to be seeming to support the military government. And so on the one hand, you might see this latest consensus resolution as a reflection, not so much of new support for trying to address the problem of the Rohingya, but rather new interest in ensuring that the military regime in Myanmar understands that the international community is united in wanting to see it improve its behavior. So while I do think it's important, you have to put it in context a little bit. And so I'm not sure that this in itself is going to lead to dramatic new action with respect to the plight of the Rohingya. And on top of that, of course, General Assembly resolutions aren't binding. There's no obligatory action that's going to come out of this, but it will reinforce the sense that both disapproval of the regime and also reinforcing the international community's attempts to address this through the Secretary General and through other venues.
Right after, within almost like weeks after the exodus, in the 72nd General Assembly, that was in 2017, the UN General Assembly actually adopted a resolution on the situation of the human rights of the Rohingya Muslims and other minorities in Myanmar. And similar resolutions were adopted by the Human Rights Council. The UN Security Council also held several meetings, and a presidential statement was issued in November 2017. A visit was undertaken also by the UN Security Council members to see the situation in the camps in Cox's Bazar, also in 2017. And as I have already mentioned, several very important mandates have been created, like the Special Envoy, the Secretary General, the Special Rapporteur, the Independent Investigative Mechanism on Myanmar. And this time, there was a major breakthrough in the UN General Assembly when the annual resolution on the situation of human rights of the Rohingya Muslims and other minorities in Myanmar came up for adoption. And this is a resolution which is jointly tabled by the OIC and the EU. And for the first time since it started in 2017, for the first time, this resolution was adopted by consensus. And on the 18th of November, and with a record number of 113 co-sponsors. So that is also, was very, very significant. And we believe that this has sent a very strong message, hopefully to the Myanmar junta and also the Rohingyas, that they're not forgotten. Because one of the biggest concerns since the political situation in Myanmar in February of this year, one of the biggest concerns we had was that the Rohingya issue will take a backseat. People are now too much concerned with the overall political situation in that country. The international community would be preoccupied and devote its attention to restoring democracy and order in that country. And it was also clear that the junta there, right from the beginning of the onset of the crisis, the junta there was not going to spare any of the minority groups. I mean, it was not only the Rohingyas, but other minority groups in Myanmar have also been suffering and being dislocated, displaced since the purge in February of this year. So from that context, for everyone, for all minorities, but especially for the Rohingyas, I mean, this adoption of this resolution by consensus, even by some very close friends of Myanmar who joined consensus to send us very strong message, I believe that sends a very strong message of the international community's unity to address this issue, in a very decisive and strong manner. So we believe it provides new impetus to the international community's efforts to resolve the long-standing political, legal, and social problems of Myanmar in a comprehensive manner. That is what we hope. And of course, I don't want to mention, but as you know, that the ASEAN has also been quite active. In February, they met, and there was a 5-point agreement, and then there was an appointment of special envoy of the ASEAN on Myanmar. This has also raised some hope. And I believe the recent decision by the ASEAN not to invite the junta leader to their summit also has sent a very strong message. So combined with that, the ASEAN decision not to invite the junta leader and the General Assembly resolution adopted by consensus, I believe some pressure will be felt by the regime.